Hi, my name's Jim Kilpatrick. I come from Scotland in the UK. I play pipe band style snare drumming, and I have won the World Solo Drumming Championship 16 times, and I've also won the World Drum Corps Championships 19 times, and I've also won the World Drumming Champion Drum Corps Championships 19 times. The setup of the marching drum or the pipe band snare drum is very important. Because of this, we need to make sure that both the bottom head and the top heads are tightened up to the point where you can let the snare wires react properly to give you a crisp, clear sound. The head I'm using on this snare drum is the Remo snare side Hazy Ambassador. Now when you put your head on, this is relatively loose, this head here, and so are the snare wires. So I'm just going to put a little bit of tension on the bottom, and the way I do this is just basically go across from each other, and just one bolt down from where you started. Always remember to put small turns on your key, whether it's the bottom or whether it's the top is irrelevant. The reason for this is because you don't really want to have one part of the snare drum pulled down and pull out the head and both the ring out of shape. So just a little bit of patience and go round the head until you take up all the slack. Now I would personally put the head on and then I would let the drum sit for maybe a few hours, preferably a day, and then go back to it. On the bottom head, you will find that when on this particular head, on the Remo snare, so the Remo Hazy Ambassador snare head, you'll find that when you tension it up and you let it rest for a while, it will have stretched out a little bit. So you have to just go over the whole thing again and start at the beginning, let it lie for another few hours, or preferably a day. I take up to about 7 days to set up my drum top and bottom. Okay, also, which is a very important point, is make sure that the head is put on exactly even. Okay, this means that the whole head's in balance and you're not going to do any damage or have anything go wrong with the head. You're more likely to pull the head out if the head is not put on evenly. Okay, so very quickly I'm going to go around it one more time. And again, you'll notice that I am putting on no more than 1/8 of a turn at any point when I'm tensioning this head up. Never underestimate the setup and the importance of tensioning the heads to the proper level. Once you have the snare head as tight as you can get it, or as tight as you need it, then if you look at these snare wires, the bottom snare wires, they're very, very loose at this point, and I'm just going to tension them up to take the slack off the snare wires until we get this nice crisp sound. Now, a mistake that is often made is that some drummers tension this up, and because there's still somewhere to go on the tension, they keep tensioning and tensioning, and they make the snare wire so tight that it chokes the drum, chokes the sound. So just make sure it's just the slack off the snare wire and no more. The other thing you can do is to balance up each corner of the snare. Just very quickly tap the snare wire 1 inch in from the edge of the shell, here and here. And this way you can raise and lower the snare wire to make sure that it's nice and even on the bottom. If you tap your snare wire 1 inch in and you get this sound, and I'm going to loosen this off just to exaggerate it, you'll get this loud tap noise. Loud response from the snare wire. In that case, you just tighten the snare wire up until that goes away. Now, this is the point where your bottom head is perfectly set up, perfectly tensioned, and your snare wires are perfectly tensioned as well. And we'll quickly move to the top head. And this top head is the Remo CyberMax high tension drum head. And this is the head I use on my drum at all times. Again, the same principle. You go to one bolt and you just put maybe 1/8 of a ton, no more, on that bolt. And you go round the drum. Now, I would also normally use what we call a tuning block. Now, a tuning block is a small, round, almost like a hockey puck, where it has different levels, and we can put the tuning block in between the high tension ring and the top hoop. And this way it goes down, and then you can set it down, tension it down onto each number, and then gently lower and tension the hoop and the head very evenly around the drum. Again, this head is relatively loose, and I'm just going to give it a quick few turns just to bring the tension back up. You can actually use 2 drum keys here, one at each side. Saves a little bit of time, but you know, if you're able to spend the time doing this properly and do it slowly, it will really make your drum head, I think that will make it last longer, and you'll be able to control exactly how much tension you put on it. I think the worst thing you can do with these kind of heads is to try and put all the tension on it at one time. If you put all the tension on it at one time, it's very likely that head is not going to last you any more than maybe a week or even less, because you've just pulled everything too soon and too much at the one time. Again, as you get tighter, you'll feel it yourself when you're tightening up. You just nudge the head a little bit at a time, bring it up to tension. Now, the tension that you put on is really up to you. You can put as much or as little tension as you wish, and it really depends on what sound you wish to produce. We actually, in the pipe band world, bring the drum up very tight, and the reason for that is because of what we play and how close together some of the movements are. So it's pretty intricate stuff that we play, and we need, if we've got 10 or 12 snare drummers in a line, we need to make sure that every drum is absolutely crystal clear on every tap. Now, these snare wires, I'm going to loosen them off. This is how you get the snare wire when you buy a new drum. If you tap this, you'll hear that there's probably very little in terms of snare response. The top snare mechanism is unique to the pipe band snare drum. And again, it's there to help produce a very fine, clear, and responsive sound from the top head. Now I'm going to tap this, and hopefully you'll probably not hear any snare. Like this. So it's flat. The drum at this point has no snare connection at all from the snare wire onto the underside of the top head, the Remo CyberMax. So what I'm going to do is, this side is height, and this side is tension. So I'm going to raise the top snare mechanism up onto the underside of the drum head. And you'll hear it connecting after a few taps. Hear that? That's the snare wire just beginning to connect with the top head. An entirely different sound is now produced. How much you tighten this or loosen off or tighten the tension and the height is entirely up to yourself. I like to bring the snare wires up so that they really press hard, and you can actually see the indentation of the snare riders come up through the CyberMax head, just no more. up here. Now that's approximately where I would have the height. Now the next one is just bring the snare wires. Now I'm going to draw the snare wires out, which produces tension on the wires. And again, sometimes you can go too far, and if you find yourself going too far, just slowly reverse it. You hear the sound of the head is changing entirely? What I'm trying to get there is a sound where there's no snare buzz and very, very high-pitched snare response. Now just let me over-tension the top mechanism. And if I over-tension the snares, you'll hear the sound of the drum completely changing. Now that produces a very dry sound, and because it's a dry sound, it means that you're not going to get the real rich response from the snare wire. So actually the snare wire is working against you. So I'm going to pull it back and detension it, and then this will give you an opportunity to lock into the snare when you get the maximum response. Now, that position where we are at the moment, I would say is ideal for playing, and I get the best of both worlds. I get a really crisp sound, a good snare response from the top, and then the sound travels down through the drum. The bottom snare wires are just loose enough and no more to react and give you a good sound from the bottom, snare response from the bottom.